Bernie Sanders has officially suspended his presidential campaign. And many people saw this coming. I think, to be fair, everybody knew it was coming sooner or later because the math was not on Bernie's side. Now, Bernie's supporters wanted him to hang on to the very last moment in a desperate bid to try and win the Democratic nomination. But the DNC and the establishment are all in for Joe Biden, which everyone basically recognizes as insane, except for a fringe small sect of weird pro-Biden establishment types who seem to think that even though Joe Biden is not all with it, he could stand up to Donald Trump in November. With Bernie Sanders dropping out, Donald Trump is all but ensured a re-election victory. We just saw it, man. Did you see Donald Trump commenting on that Joe Biden tweet? A journalist asked Trump, how do you feel about this Biden tweet? And Trump said, Biden didn't write that. And Biden's not even watching this press briefing. And even if he is, he wouldn't understand it. Bernie and Trump, both of their bases recognize Joe Biden is not a viable option. Which brings me to the main subject of this story. Will Joe Biden actually get support from Bernie Sanders supporters? And the answer is obviously no. Joe Rogan recently said on his podcast he would rather vote for Donald Trump than Joe Biden. Because anyone with two brain cells to rub together knows that Joe Biden isn't functioning anymore. Look, you can be nice to the guy, you can respect the guy for his career, and a lot of the progressives do not. But the guy's just not with it. I've talked about Bernie Sanders' policies. I don't agree, but at least Bernie Sanders can form sentences. I mean, look, you can have a real debate between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump on trade. Even Donald Trump has expressed in the past, it was a leaked audio, where he said he was concerned about Bernie the most because Bernie talks big on trade. Well, Bernie Sanders made the mistake of trying to pander to many woke activists over the past year and a half or so, which I believe really hurt him. But Joe Biden just is not viable in terms of actually being a president. We'll see how things play out, but the big concern right now is with the more mainstream Bernie Sanders progressives kind of declaring war on the DNC. I mean, they are livid. They're saying, don't vote. I kid you not. Hashtag never Biden. People on Twitter saying, I encourage you not to vote, which is crazy. I mean, vote for somebody, I guess, but you don't have to. But they're absolutely taking the war to the Democratic establishment. Bernie or bust is alive and well. And around 10% of, I believe it was around 10% of Democrats switched for Donald Trump. I'm sorry, that's not the number. It was around 9 to 10 million Democrats voted for Donald Trump in 2016. And it was 12 to 18% of Bernie Sanders supporters who voted for Donald Trump. Like I mentioned with Joe Rogan, I think it's very likely we are going to see some Bernie or bust individuals vote for Trump out of spite. But there's even one small account called Bernie or else. What does that mean? Well, as we've seen in the past, there's a real fear that Bernie Sanders supporters get violent. I mean, there's the DNC is being postponed. We'll see how things play out. But there was a very real fear of rioting. And now you have people Bernie Sanders himself had to condemn the violence that had erupted in 2016. But we've already seen it from the Veritas video leak. So we'll go through all of this. Will we see widespread protest violence? I think so. Absolutely. Because I was there at the DNC in 2016. I saw how the left reacted to what Hillary Clinton and the DNC had done to Bernie Sanders. And now here we are. You think Joe Biden is a better bet? I think it's clear to everybody the DNC would rather lose to Trump than let Bernie Sanders win. And while many Trump supporters would probably agree that they would not want Bernie Sanders, how do you think that makes Bernie Sanders supporters feel? That Bernie actually can think straight. And even if you think he has bad ideas, the dude could actually talk about stuff. Joe Biden is a joke, an absolute joke. It is a practical joke being made upon all of the Bernie supporters. Not only is the DNC saying, you can't win, we won't let you, but we're going to choose the most absurd candidate to smack you down with to make sure you know that we will absolutely burn this to the ground before we let you win. And that's what's happening. Let's read the news. Sanders drops out of the presidential race, and then I'm quickly going to show you all the tweets from the supporters. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There are several ways you can give. Physical address, there's a PayPal location. But the best thing you can do is just share this video. I'm sure most people will have heard because it's a major national trend, but we're going to talk about Bernie supporters kind of going nuclear on the Democratic Party. So if you want to help support the channel, you can share it, hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, and hit the notification bell if you want to make sure to get videos from me every day. We'll just read a little bit about this from The Hill because I think we get it. Bernie Sanders is out. I'm more interested in what the aftermath is, but The Hill reports Senator Sanders suspended his presidential bid on Wednesday, ending a campaign that once appeared on track to dominate the Democratic nominating contest, but that quickly lost momentum. Sanders began reevaluating his campaign after a string of primary losses last month. But he continued his push for the nomination for weeks before ultimately telling his staff in a conference call on Wednesday morning that he had decided to drop out of the race. His decision to suspend his campaign effectively paves the way for former Vice President Joe Biden to claim the Democratic presidential nomination, which all but ensures Donald Trump wins re-election. I bring you now to Twitter. Take a look at this. Dem exit is trending. Wow. Democratic Party, the DNC, Biden, Bernie, 1.1 million tweets for Bernie, but Dem exit, only about 9,500. Hey, people are actually talking about quitting the Democratic Party over this. They're going to war. Hey, good for them. Like I said, man, insult to injury. You want to smack Bernie Sanders down? The DNC, you want to make sure, you know what they did? They put up Joe Biden of all people. Now that is insult to injury. We can see here, these are just random tweets. This guy says, I am never voting for Biden. Another person says, Trump on Biden. Let's see here. I don't vote for, I can't even read that. I will never support Joe Biden. I have no empathy for Joe Biden. Hashtag never Biden. Hashtag never Biden. Pass it on. These people are not going to vote for Joe Biden. And you know why? Because Joe Biden, first of all, has nothing in agreement with any of these people. What don't the Democrats understand? The progressive wing is not your traditional Democratic Party. They agree on very, very little. Now, Joe Biden has tried to court them with his, open borders policy stances. And I don't mean like complete. I mean, like there are some aspects of his policy he's proposed that are decently in the open borders spectrum. But it's not enough. You can't win these people over this way. It's all or nothing. And I'll be honest with you. Even Bernie Sanders wasn't enough for them. Bernie's, what was it saying? Not me, us. Many of these people don't necessarily even agree with Bernie on how he behaves. Many are upset that he's continually endorsed or supported the mainstream establishment. And Bernie is just the best that they could get. Trump on Joe Biden. I love this story. It's when he said that Joe Biden couldn't understand what was even going on. It's absolutely incredible. Here's a question. Let me just read what he said. Donald Trump is not responsible for the virus, but he is responsible for failing to prepare. How do you respond? Trump said he didn't write that. That was done by a Democrat operative. He doesn't write. He is probably not even watching right now. And if he is, he doesn't understand what he is watching. Woo! Yeah, Trump nuked Biden, but we all get it, man. Even Bernie Sanders supporters understand just how ridiculous it is to try and make Biden the candidate. Here we have this story from Real Clear Politics. Trump wasn't the first to wonder about Biden's mental acuity. Of course he wasn't. So many people were saying the same thing. Well, Donald Trump has responded by calling on Bernie supporters, to go Republican. I'll tell you what, have you seen where Donald Trump entertained the possibility of Medicare for all? I laughed so hard at this. The Bernie people, the Bernie populists were laughing too. Not all of them. But Trump said that it's not fair that there are 30 million people uninsured, and there was some hinting at expanding Medicare or Medicare for all those who are uninsured. Joe Biden, on the other hand, came out hard against it. It's almost like Trump pulled a bait and switch. No, I'm opposed to it. Then Biden says, me too. And Trump goes, actually, I'm for it. So you get all these populists who are now looking at Trump confused, like, is he really going to do this? Putting Trump just a little bit to the left of where Biden is on this. Well, Donald Trump tweeted, Bernie Sanders is out. Thank you to Elizabeth Warren. If not for her, Bernie would have won almost every state on Super Tuesday. This ended just like the Democrats and the DNC wanted. Same as the crooked Hillary fiasco. The Bernie people should come to the Republican Party. Trade. Brandon Strzok of the Walk Away campaign responding, hey, Bernie supporters, ready to walk away? Yes, because we just saw hashtag Dem exit trending nationally. Blair White says they can come, but they need to leave the communism on the other side. Hear. Jimmy Dore. Jimmy Dore's awesome, by the way. He's a progressive YouTuber, very critical of the Democrats. And he tweeted, Trump willing to tell a truth that MSNBC isn't. In response to what Trump said, if not for Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders would have done substantially better. And so listen, man, you're bringing the Trump people and the Bernie people together. Now, you're not going to get them on policy. You're not going to get them on a lot of cultural issues, but you will get them on their hatred for you. So thanks for providing that common enemy. Scott Adams, Dilbert cartoonist and commentator personality, says it's official. Trump is running unopposed. Yeah, Scott, you nailed it. Trump is running unopposed. But I got more tweets for you. This one was particularly interesting to me. It's at Bernie or else. I don't know who this person is. I don't know. Some people are accusing them of being a plant or Russian propaganda. No, I believe it. I believe there are many people who believe Bernie or else. They responded to Andrew Yang, who said, Bernie Sanders is an effing hero. Let's come together and beat this guy. Yeah, a bunch of people said that this ain't it, Andrew. I think Yang's a cool guy. Nah. Yang got a ton of progressive supporters because he had that UBI policy, the freedom dividend. Coming out now and saying get behind Biden. You know what? Look, Biden is a worse candidate than Donald Trump. For one reason, policy does not matter. I don't know how many times I need to say it, but Biden is just not a viable entity. Of course, the Atlantic wrote that. You remember when I talked about that Atlantic article that said Joe Biden just stay alive. Well, Bernie or else has a website. It literally called Bernie or else, not Bernie or bust. They said, we've graduated. We're Bernie or else. Or else what? Well, I mean, they might come out and get a little raucous, if you know what I mean. Here's what they write. It was Bernie or bust. Now it's Bernie or else. Establishment Democrats can't defeat Trump without us. 1,992 have pledged their support to vote for the Democratic nominee if it's Bernie Sanders. And there are a bunch of comments from people who have signed this pledge. I can't read them because these people are very angry. But yeah, they exist. It's not a very, very large number, but the sentiment does exist. Kyle Kalinske, famous progressive YouTube personality, responded to Andrew Yang saying no. When Yang said, let's get together and win, he just said straight up no. Greg Hausch, who is a moderately well-known activist associated with the Anonymous movement, tweeted in response to Andrew Yang, wrong way to go with this, Andrew Yang. There is a percentage of the American population large enough to count as real numbers on a national poll that will never be okay with Joe Biden. He is not a good man. If you want Trump out, you're going to have to find a way to reach us. They're not going to be able to. Cigar and Jetty of the Hills Rising tweets, the Democrats under Joe Biden are now the party of left cultural elites, suburbanites and Wall Street, while conning traditional voting bases into sticking with them. The right now definitively has the opportunity to embrace national populism and cement their power. Imagine what'll happen if Trump convinces his base to compromise on a few things with the progressive left. With a common enemy like the DNC establishment, you might actually see a bunch of people just get on board with Trump. Many won't. The overwhelming majority would not. But you heard it from Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is the canary in the coal mine. Joe Rogan put the final nail in Biden's coffin. This is what CCN writes. Joe Rogan said what many Bernie Sanders supporters are thinking. He won't vote for Joe Biden. He'll probably end up voting for Trump. I love it. This is the best timeline ever. Part of me wants to believe in this grand conspiracy. The Democrats secretly do want Trump. That's right. They love the guy. Because how could they make so many mistakes? It's actually mind-blowing to me how terrible they are at what they do. CCN writes, Joe Rogan, who previously backed Bernie Sanders, said Friday he'd vote for Trump over likely Democrat candidate Joe Biden. Joe Rogan recently backed Sanders, said Friday he'd vote for Trump over Biden. While polls still show Biden as the favorite to win, Rogan's support has all but ended Joe Biden's bid for the White House. They mention the Joe Rogan effect. Millions of Americans tune into Rogan's podcast, giving the comedian a huge platform with which to dismantle Biden. His guest during the episode was mathematician and economist Eric Weinstein, who also said he wouldn't vote for Biden, but stopped short of throwing his support behind Trump. This is the important context here. It's not just about Rogan, it's about Eric as well. Famed intellectual dark web name creator. He won't vote for either. This is what you're going to see. The Bernie people are out. They're not going to vote for this guy. But some of them will, which means you're going to end up with two camps. Trump gaining more support and Biden straight up losing massive support. Donald Trump also mentioned, can't see AOC +3 supporting Sleepy Joe. I disagree. I think Ocasio-Cortez will get behind Biden. I really do. She's been trying to play mainstream. Vox writes, Joe Biden will have a very hard time winning over the Bernie sphere. The problem isn't his platform, it's that he's not trusted. Over at the Washington Times, they say, quote, extreme action. Project Veritas unearths more radical Bernie Sanders staffers. Now, this is what gets important. It's the important context. Bernie supporters, you're going to have to bear with me on this one if you're watching, because I know a bunch are going to get mad. They're going to say, we are not violent, all these things. I'll tell you what. We heard it straight from these supporters. You want to pretend like they're talking big, that's fine. But we've seen how some of these people, the Antifa people, go around and get violent. I'm not here to talk about other groups. I'm talking about Bernie Sanders dropping out. And I'm talking about people threatening. I mean, people were saying that they were going to go to Milwaukee and they were going to burn it down. So the DNC is being postponed. We'll see how things go. Joe Biden is saying he wants a virtual DNC or whatever. Fine. We get it, Joe. You're the nominee. But I was there at the DNC in 2016 and I saw these people protest. Did these people go and protest the RNC, the Republican National Convention? Nope. There was a tiny, tiny handful of protesters there, but not really anything interesting. At the DNC, however, it was strange to see many of the American left progressives protesting the Democrats because the Democrats had stolen their real opportunity. For the longest time, many of these people are disenfranchised. And now Bernie Sanders comes along and they feel like this is their opportunity to actually get a candidate who would support them. What happens? Hillary Clinton swoops in, steals the show, and people were trying to knock down barriers, jump fences. There were thousands of people there. None of them, or I should say a very, very tiny, tiny few, a couple dozen, at the Republican convention just hanging out. So will they get violent now? I think it's an interesting question. It's a fair point. Considering that we've seen, and not all of them, obviously, I just showed you people like Jimmy Dore and Kyle Klinsky. Of course, they're not. Of course, they're regular people who have political opinions and do shows. But there are a lot of people who are far left who have now seen their last opportunity wash away. Project Veritas did a series of exposés. They interviewed Bernie Sanders staffers, and some of them said, this might be our last resort. That's exactly how they framed it. Some of them said, even if Bernie wins, they may need to take more extreme action. What do you think they're going to do now that Bernie is out? And this is why I think that they're not necessarily here for Bernie. They were willing to accept Bernie Sanders as good enough for now, because Bernie Sanders has absolutely played to the mainstream. And now that Bernie is out, well, I think now we're going to see a real backlash. ABC News says Democratic backlash after Sanders supporters' violence in Nevada. Leaders of the party are speaking out about the violence. This is 2016. You want to pretend like it's not real? I'm sure there are a lot of Bernie supporters who are going to say, no, it's not true. Tim, you're wrong. You're biased. Look, man, I was there in San Jose when they were beating people up outside of a Trump rally. These were Bernie Sanders supporters. Nobody wanted to believe me. They got mad when I said it, when I did. But I tweeted, the people who were there fighting and chasing and hitting people, they were Bernie supporters. And many people said, Tim, how do you know they're Bernie supporters? Were they walking around saying they voted for Bernie? And I was like, yes. Yes, they were walking around saying they were supporting Bernie Sanders. Some were wearing shirts saying Bernie Sanders. Some had signs. And then the crowd got violent. We're spitting on people, hitting people, punching people in the face. It got violent. And since then, we've seen the escalation of Antifa. Many more people joining up and getting violent. And there's a real possibility we see more. Secular Talk, Kyle Klinsky says, if Biden loses, the left will be blamed. If he wins, the left will get zero credit. Because it's an abusive game and you won't be taken seriously until you demand it in clear and inflexible terms. I'm not, Kyle Klinsky brings up a good point, but I feel like there's going to be some people who take this as we must take a stand no matter what. Kyle's basically making the point that no matter what they do, they're going to lose because the establishment doesn't want them to win. So if this is the case, maybe I'm misinterpreting what Kyle says, so forgive me if I'm getting it wrong. But what do you think progressives are going to do now that they think there's no hope? Do you think there's going to be like, okay, I'm done with politics? Or do you think that they're going to now embrace what many others have embraced in the past, getting violent and fighting and demanding revolution? I mean, Bernie called for revolution, right? Do these people no longer want the revolution? They do. And it was just taken from them. So now I can only imagine they're going to be, being backed into a corner. They'll get more aggressive. Let's get real, though. Donald Trump just won. It's over. Don't even bother trying to argue with me about it. Bernie supporters and Trump supporters probably both already acknowledge it is done. It is a done deal. Trump is going to landslide in November for so many different reasons. The economy was doing really, really great up until the pandemic. Even in the pandemic, most people seem to agree with the president, support his actions. And Joe Biden just literally is not a candidate. He's literally nobody. And I do mean it. He doesn't say anything. He's late to the party. He can't speak properly. In fact, the Democrats would do better if they ran a mannequin. Okay, I'm being a bit facetious, but if the Democrats ran somebody who didn't say a single word, that person would probably do better. What's the saying? It's better to remain quiet and appear stupid than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. Joe Biden removes all doubt all day, every day. If Joe Biden just sat there smiling and said, I'm going to win, people would be like, I'll vote for that guy. Instead, he starts talking about nonsense and it's just gibberish. Some of these tweets are hilarious. Many progressives now are tweeting about their perceived Trump debate with Biden. And it's Trump saying, I'm going to do great for this country. It's going to be huge. You're going to love it. And then Joe Biden says, mumble, sure mumble, reelect Trump, blah, 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 blah. Just gibberish, just nonsensical gibberish. Here we have a poll. National Review. Americans prefer Trump's leadership to Biden's during coronavirus response. A plurality of Americans prefer the leadership of Trump to that of former Vice President Joe Biden amid the coronavirus pandemic, according to a Politico Morning Consult poll released Wednesday. This just came out. Of all of the days for Bernie Sanders to drop out, Bernie himself is getting he's getting a little bit of heat, but it's not really bad. People are saying like, thank you for doing what you did, but you should not have dropped out. I also think Bernie shouldn't have dropped out. I'm not saying I like the guy's policies, but I think there's something very, very wrong with this country if we are going to be seeing Donald Trump up against Joe Biden. For the past 4 years, 6 years, with Hillary Clinton and now Joe Biden, it's clear that there isn't a Democratic Party. It's just the Republicans at this point. I get it that you've got House Democrats having the majority, but I feel like that was a last-ditch effort by some people who are looking for an alternative. But there's no cohesive alternative anymore. There's no viable alternative. You've got Pelosi, Schiff, Nadler, Schumer, just investigation. They're not getting anything done. They're not doing anything. Joe Biden is just not a viable candidate. Trump has done things, whether you like it or not, he has done things. And now with the coronavirus, people agree with it. What do the Democrats have to offer? Absolutely nothing. They could have had Bernie Sanders. And I'm not saying Bernie Sanders is perfect. I'm not saying Bernie Sanders' his policies make sense. I personally disagree with him. But think about the options. A Bernie candidate who came out and said, I would like to give Medicare for all. Trump saying, I think it's unfair, maybe, but it's probably too expensive. Versus Joe Biden, blah, blah, yada, blah, mumble, mumble, mumble. People might look at Bernie Sanders and say he's wrong. People might look at him and say, I like the idea. That would have been a real candidate. Instead, you are going to get a losing Joe Biden. So we'll see how things end up playing out. But it's clear. I think Bernie Sanders supporters are not done. I think it's not so much about violence or disruption. I think it's about revenge, retribution, whatever you want to call it. The Wall Street Journal says Bernie Sanders' allies aim to keep shaking up the Democratic Party. Supporters of Vermont Senator acknowledge he is unlikely to win the presidential nomination, but they say he's no longer just a lone voice. I'm willing to bet that many of these Bernie people and far leftists and progressives, I don't think they're going to be mad at Trump about this. Trump's minding his own business. They don't have to like him. But I think they're going to see the DNC as someone who's personally slighted them. And I think you're going to see a lot of anger directed at them. And that's what we saw in 2016. We'll see how it plays out. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at youtube.com/TimCastNews at 6 p.m. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you all then.